All right, I'm gonna get in Facebook Live going. Great. So hello, everybody. Welcome. We'll just give it one more minute for people to get signed on, but we will start on time. But I'm glad you're all here to join us today, and I hope you brought your questions. Well, we'll get going, I think. So, again, thanks everyone for joining us. Before we get started, just a little bit of admin. Everybody is on mute. If you would like to ask questions of Rodney Paul, if you're on Zoom, you can post those in the chat box. And if you are on Facebook, you can post your questions in the comments box, and those will be relayed to Rodney. So this is a Q&A. This is for all of you to ask your burning questions about injured wildlife, rehabilitating wildlife, what you should do, that kind of thing. I, of course, do have some questions prepared, but really I want to hear, Rodney wants to hear from all of you. This is your chance to ask an expert, and I hope you will take advantage of that. But I will kick things off. Start with a personal question about you, Rodney. Well, let me start with your background, of course, first. Rodney Paul is the director of Raptor Rehab of Central Arkansas, a nonprofit founded in 2003. Raptor Rehab's mission is to care for ill, injured, or orphaned birds of prey and to be able to release them back into the wild. Raptor Rehab holds a Raptor Rehabilitation and Education license from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they work closely with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, recovering various birds of prey. Their facility has over 3,000 square feet of flight pens built to strict specifications. And I want to say this now, and I want to say it again later, that it takes a lot to feed and care for raptors. It's costly, and Raptor Rehab of Central Arkansas is a nonprofit, and you can help them by making a donation, and we'll provide that link on our Facebook page and even in the comment box for all of you. So, Rodney Paul, thank you for being with us this evening. Let me ask the first question here, more of a personal one than a business one, is how did you get started in wildlife rehabilitation?
As a kid growing up in southeast Missouri, the minister at our church was a huge songbirder. And anytime we go on church outings, Brother Davison, he'd identify birds just by their bird calls. And that really impressed me as a kid. Life goes on. I go in the Army, get out of the Army, move down here to Arkansas. And I was single at the time. I had a lot of time on my hands. So I actually started volunteer with the Little Rock Zoo's docent program and got to work with their raptors in the education department there. And at that time, there was a lady there. She was a Raptor rehabber, and she's the one that actually sparked my interest to go into Raptor rehabilitation. At that time, though, I was on the fence to either go into falconry or rehabilitation. It would have been a whole lot cheaper to be a falconer, but I couldn't do both. But I am extremely glad that I did choose the path that I did choose.
Why did you choose Raptor Rehab over falconry?
There's a need for rehabilitators in our state. The list from when I started out almost 18 years ago has dwindled as far as for mammals and birds. The names have dwindled off. A lot of people have gotten out of it due to the expense of it. There's just a big need for rehabilitators out there, not only in Arkansas, but in every state. That does have a rehabilitation program, allows for rehabilitation. Not all states allow rehabilitators.
Oh, I did not know that. What would be the reason for not allowing rehabilitators?
I think it's Nebraska is one that I can think of off the top of my head. I just encountered that situation this past fall. Their Game and Fish, Department of Natural Resources, whatever they refer to it up there, they just don't allow rehabilitation. If anybody calls with an injured animal, they'll tell them leave it be or take them to the Lincoln Zoo. That's if the Lincoln Zoo can actually take them in. So that's the only rehabilitator that's allowed in the state of Nebraska. That was the information I got last fall. It could have changed by now, but there are some, well, I won't mention that, but there are some people that do some limited rehabilitation in that state, according to the rehabilitator that I did talk to.
Well, I have a question here from a 9-year-old aspiring ornithologist. And I really like this question because it's a twist on a typical question that I have gotten is, how do I attract more raptors to my property? Usually people are like, oh, these raptors are eating my songbirds. How do I get rid of them? Attract them. So I love that idea. Yes. How am I to attract raptors?
Well, one idea is to put out the bird feeders. You have you have a couple of the hawks, my gosh,
Cooper's
my mind
hawks.
right now. A couple of the hawks, Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks love bird feeders. That's smorgasbord for them because they love songbirds. On that same twist, if you do have a problem with sharp-shinned Cooper's hawks, take your bird feeders completely away for a short period of time, and they will leave the neighborhood. Because I have songbird feeders all over our yards as well. Another thing is to build nesting boxes appropriate sized for the raptors. Also, the location where you live is pretty important, whether you live in town, you live in the country, and what kind of raptor you're trying to attract. Now, of course, obviously, you don't want to go throw dead animals out in the yard for the vultures, but there are nesting boxes that you can build that are appropriate for raptors.
And to that, I would add snags. If you've got a standing dead tree, leave it alone, because that's a great perch for raptors.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's a good question now.
Yeah, good question. So another question is, what kinds of raptors do you take care of?
We take anything that flies into or out of the state of Arkansas. We have bald eagles, hawks, owls, falcons, vultures. Probably the most unusual bird that we've ever had. It was on a lot of birders' list of birds to see. We had a crested caracara 3 years ago. It was a vagrant. We actually banded it, put a radio transmitter on it, took it back up to Oil Trough, Arkansas, and released it where it was found after the rehab process. It was actually tracked for about 7 months, flew back south of Dallas, Texas, a little town called Ennis, Texas. And it's not live data that we got from the bird every time we fly by a cell phone tower. That's when the data would download, and this way we knew where it was at. Unfortunately, 7 months later, it was found dead down in like I said, south of Dallas. But it was fun tracking it. We've had pelicans. We will take waterfowl. We get the run-of-the-mill Canada geese, the ducklings, things like that. But we specialize in raptors.
I remember that caracara, the crested caracara. Actually saw that bird when it was on the ground in Oil Trough before you picked it up.
I was in San Antonio when I got a call from Karen Rao, biologist with the Game and Fish Commission. Ironic thing about that story is a friend of mine in San Antonio had just texted me a picture of a caracara a few days prior and said, "What kind of bird is this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll look into it." And it was a caracara. 3 days later, Karen Rao calls, "Hey, Rodney, we've got a caracara here in Arkansas and it's coming to your facility." I was chomping at the bit to come home, see that bird. So I had to wait like another week or two before I could come home from work.
Neat bird, member of the Falcon family, and expanding their range north and eastwards from Texas and points south. So you'd expect the first state record to be in southwest Arkansas, not northeast Arkansas, but
right.
Those
We'll
birds
take it.
range all the way to Canada, so who knows?
Right.
Interesting. So another question is, if I come across an injured raptor along the road or in the field, how do I know if I should leave it be and let nature take its course, or pick it up and get it to a rehab?
Before you do anything, of course, I know a lot of it's time permitting, but before you pick it up, call a rehabber first if you can and consult with them, because you may just need to leave it alone. A lot of times right now we're getting slammed with baby hawks. People will take them home and then they'll call us and I'll tell them, take it back where you got it, put it down. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But if you can, possibly call a wildlife rehabilitator first and, like I said, talk with them. If not, you can pick it up. There are a lot of people that are scared to take them home because it's a felony. That's not the intent of that law. The intent of that law is for that person to pick it up. That's not permitted. Take it home, try to feed it, take care of it, and raise it, and go through the rehab process. That's what that law is for. It's kind of like a Good Samaritan law in a way.
Right. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act protects all of our native
Right.
birds from being captured and owned and handled and owning any.
Right.
But if you're transporting a bird, keeping it for a licensed rehabber, that's okay. No one's going to prosecute you.
Right. Exactly.
But you touched on finding baby birds. Can you elaborate on when you find a baby hawk or the baby bird, why you should leave it alone?
Okay, that's actually going through the growth process. Okay, first birds are nesters where they're living in the nest. As they get just a little bit older, they will hop out of the nest, become branchers. They're hopping around the branches, doing bird things. And then finally, eventually, they'll fly down to the ground. They're not fully flighted, but that's still part of the process, the growth process. Parents are still watching them, out for them. They know exactly where they're at, and they're still feeding them. A lot of times, we do have some birds, obviously, that fall in the wrong area. Dogs, cats, kids are around. They fall out in public places. There are exceptions, but 90% of the time, these birds can be left completely alone. They'll be just fine. And mom and dad can feed them a whole lot cheaper than I can.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So and all songbirds leave the nest before they're able to fly. They're called fledglings. So
right.
Whether it's a songbird or a hawk, if it's mostly feathered, eyes open, if it can move around, it's a fledgling. It's meant to be out of the nest. Leave it alone.
Exactly. It puts a burden on us, and it puts the bird through undue stress. Stresses a bird out for no reason.
Well, when you do have a legitimately injured bird come in, what are the most common types of injury that you find and deal with?
See a lot of head injuries. Also, probably about 85 to 90% of our intakes have broken wings. If a bird has if a bird has a broken joint, elbow, knee, anything like any kind of a joint, that's not fixable. There's nothing could be done. I often have people ask me, well, what's going to happen to it? And I said, well, it'll have to be euthanized. They said, well, can't you just amputate the wing? No, you cannot do that. It's illegal, and it's totally unethical and unfair to that bird. The bird will lose its ability to stand up and perch and balance. And besides that, it's just illegal. So like I said, we do see a lot of wing injuries, a lot of head injuries, but this time of year, we're getting a lot of babies.
Can you speculate on the causes of those head and wing injuries?
Majority of all of our intakes are car strikes, vehicle strikes. Birds, they're after prey, they're doing bird things, they're flying around. Of course, obviously they don't know what traffic is, and they'll fly into a vehicle, owls fly into vehicles at night. Right now we're in mating season for the hawks. Hormones are active, so the birds are going to be more active, and so we see a lot more injuries probably this time of year, along with, of course, the babies.
So you do bring in some birds, and of course your goal is to rehabilitate them and release them. But for birds that don't need to be euthanized but can't go back into the wild, what do you do with them?
We do have some education birds that we keep that are on our permit for educational purposes. Unfortunately, there's so many birds of prey out there getting permanently injured. Institutions like zoos that can have them legally, they have what they need already. I've got 3 bald eagles right now that are non-releasable that I'm trying to place. Nobody wants them because everybody that can have them does have them already. I've had 1 bald eagle for almost 3 years now. It's extremely difficult to place, a non-releasable raptor. So unfortunately, to answer your question, unfortunately, most of the time we're going to euthanize that bird. It cannot be released. We hate to do that, but that's we can't warehouse birds. Nobody will warehouse birds. You can't afford to feed them anyway.
Sure. And the truth is, if no one had picked up that injured bird, they probably would have died of exposure and starvation anyway.
Correct. And that's the positive side to bringing it to us. If it does end up euthanized, its suffering is ended almost instantaneously. And so it's not going to sit out there in the wild for 2 or 3 days and starve to death, or a coyote get it, dog get it, cat get it. So it's a quick, painless end.
I'm sure it's hard to do, but thank you for doing that for those birds.
That's part of the rehab process. A lot of people don't understand that. Euthanasia is a big part of the rehabilitation.
So while you do have raptors in your care, what do you feed them?
Primarily rats, mice, and fish. Of course, our bald eagles are our fish eaters. Fortunately, of course, we do vary their diets with the occasional roadkill squirrel. I will pick up fresh roadkill. I'm not above that. It's free food, and that keeps it from getting smashed on the highway. I've picked up roadkill rabbits, roadkill squirrels, so we'll vary their diets in that sense. But the eagles primarily eat fish, then the other raptors will eat the rats and mice. And of course, with vultures that we actually have vultures in with our eagles right now. So whatever the eagles don't eat, the vultures come in behind them and clean it up. They're not very picky.
Well, isn't that efficient?
Well, not, that way we don't waste a whole lot.
Another question has come in is, what's the most docile raptor you've handled, and what's the most aggressive raptor you've handled?
I will go with the most aggressive first. I've been bitten in the mouth twice by two different bald eagles. I got 3 stitches in my top lip one time. Another time I got 7 stitches in my lower lip. And eagles, extraordinarily powerful bird. Very, very powerful. You have to know what you're doing. Even when you know what you're doing, there's still risk. Docile birds are probably your barred owls. Those are probably the most docile raptors in my experience.
It's interesting. They seem like they're pretty big and intimidating birds. So it's interesting that they would be more docile.
They want you to think that.
So another question is, do you have a training pond for the fish eaters to make sure they're healed enough to catch fish again?
No, we do not. The birds that come to us, except for obviously the babies during baby season, they instinctively know that. They already know that, and so that's not necessary. In rare cases, we will do some live prey training with some of our raptors in a very, very controlled environment, because our house is on our property here. And so, we don't want the rats and the mice to get out of their enclosure that they're training for our raptors and, end up in our house. And besides that, money and time, and we're located on 3 acres, and you just don't have a pond.
Right.
And it's not like you can tell a bird to go out there and go catch a fish, and we don't tie a rope or crayons to it. Matter of fact, our rehabilitation birds are strictly hands off. We do not touch them at all unless we have to move them from cage to cage as they progressively get better, excuse me, or to administer medications.
What is the weight of prey that each type of raptor can carry? Sometimes you hear stories of people of small pets being carried off, but is that really true?
Well, yes and no. Let me answer the first part. As a rule of thumb, any bird of prey instinctively knows it can take 1/3 of its own body weight and carry it off to a perch. I've seen red-tailed hawks eating carcasses larger than them, but they're not carrying it off. Okay. To answer the question as to the pets, yes, attacks will happen. I've actually had maybe 3 calls in the last almost 18 years concerning something like that. It's rare. Most common place or time it would happen is probably during nesting season, if the pet were to be around, that raptor's nest. So I don't think it's going to carry it off. But at the same time, if you have baby kittens out at nighttime and you have great horned owls, the great horned owl is totally capable of carrying away a baby kitten.
Sure. Someone wants to know if there is one rehabilitation story that stands out above the rest, one memorable bird that you've had.
Probably the pelican. We had a pelican about 5 years ago now. Had a right leg injury, nerve damage, couldn't walk when we first got it. Mean as a devil. And a pelican actually has a tooth on the end of their bill. And that tooth is very, very sharp. Anyway, was mean as a devil until he figured out I was food. I was the fish bucket. As soon as he saw the fish bucket, we were best buddies. Him and also we do have an imprint black vulture. He'll follow you around just like a dog. But as far as rehab birds, I would have to go back to probably the Pelican.
Just because it was something different from your normal bird selection?
I think that was a big part of it. Yeah, that was probably the biggest part of it, the uniqueness of it, you know. And like I said, as soon as he figured out I had fish, we were best buddies. He wasn't mean at all towards me.
But do you find that individual birds have unique personalities?
Yes, they do. They have personalities just like we do. They have good days, they have bad days. Yes, they have different personalities. Absolutely. Some of our education birds, there's a couple of them I haven't handled in a long time because they don't like me, but they like some of our other volunteers. They get plenty of glove time with them. So I'm not going to stress them out when I do have people that can handle those birds, because they do get, you know, their time out and time on the glove. So yes, they do have personalities.
Well, can you, speaking of your education birds, can you describe some of the training that you and your docents do with these birds? How you get them to sit on the glove and perform?
One of our volunteers has been with us since day one. By the way, we started the volunteer program about 8 years ago because it became too much for me and my wife, you know, to keep up with the amount of birds we were taking in. We get over 300 birds a year. Right now we have 57 at our facility. So anyway, we have one volunteer. She's been with us since day one for about 8 years now. She has the patience of Job. She does a lot of our bird training, our glove training, and she has her own technique where she puts the food on the glove. Well, with the glove not even being on your hand, she will put the food on the glove to let the bird get used to the glove. Then after the bird starts eating off that glove, she eventually puts the glove on, and the bird gets more comfortable stepping up to the glove to eat because it gets accustomed to eating food off the glove. So that's her technique.
Thanks. Another question is, what is your most immediate need? I assume that means in terms of supplies or funding.
It's always funding. We spend about $10,000 a year on food alone. We also have electric bill to pay. We have water bill to pay. We have transportation costs to go pick up birds, you know, gas costs and things like that. And so honestly, funding, donations. And a lot of people think if they can't donate $50 or $100, we appreciate $5 donations and $10 donations just as much as we do the others, because those really, really add up.
Well, someone who works for a nonprofit myself, I definitely understand that.
Right.
So how long does it take for a person to train to become a licensed Raptor rehabilitator?
The process when I started out, again, this is almost 18 years ago. I haven't looked into any changes the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has made. This is raptors only, not mammals for that the state covers. It took me 4 months to build my facilities. By the way, we're up to 6,000 square feet now, not the 3,000. I need to change that. Anyway, it took me about 4 months to build my facilities. It was a good thing I was single back then because I could eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly, you know, sandwiches on my own. But anyway, you have to have, back then, you had to have 250 hours volunteer time with a licensed rehabilitator. Fortunately for me, since I was working at the zoo, I was kind of grandfathered in because of my time spent with the zoo. Also, after you build your facilities, you still do not have your permits. You still have to get pictures sent to Atlanta. That's my regional office here in Arkansas. I had to send pictures to Atlanta and get them to approve it after I built them to the specifications. And then they said, okay, we'll give you a permit, but now you got to pay for the permit. So I have to pay for my permits from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for me to do this out of my pocket through donations. Ironic, but that's the government.
Yeah. And just as a couple of reminders to people, again, if you have questions for Rodney Paul, you can put them in the chat box, or if we're on Facebook in the comment box. Also, this is scheduled to go to 6, but if questions keep coming in, we can go a little bit longer than that. So please keep your questions coming for us. We got another question waiting for you is, do we have wild falcons in Arkansas?
Absolutely. Probably the most prominent one is the American kestrel. American kestrels are all over the state, especially if you look around over the farmlands. The kestrels, bigger than a sparrow. The kestrels are the smallest falcon in the United States. They're the second smallest falcon in the world. Gorgeous little birds. But yes, we have those. We have the peregrine falcons that the two most prominent ones I can think of off the top of my head.
And yeah, Merlins as
Right,
well.
Merlins, right? Yeah,
Slightly larger. Yeah.
we've actually had two Merlins in the last 18 years.
Yeah, a little bit bigger than the kestrel, and here mostly in the wintertime.
Right.
And then that crested caracara, which had a few state records of crested caracara now. So someone wants to know if a raptor might drown or die as a consequence of capturing prey and not wanting to let go.
I've heard those stories. I'm a see it to believe it guy. That's about all I can say. I've heard the stories about bald eagles catching fish and it's too big for them to get out of the water and it'll drag them into the water. It's kind of like a cat climbing in a tree and can't get down. And how many cat skeletons have you seen in a tree?
Well, no, the vultures take care of that, right?
Well, like I said, I can't substantiate that, so I really can't, speak with authority on that.
Are there opportunities to be an apprentice?
At my facility right now, no, because we do have, we are maxed out with all of our volunteers. It is time consuming. Of course, I work full-time job, even though I'm furloughed right now because of my job. It's not feasible right now with our facility. I believe there are 8 of us in the state with federal permits to do rehabilitation. Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has a wonderful website, agfc.com. If you go to their website, follow the links to wildlife rehabilitators, you'll find a list for all the mammal rehabilitators and all the raptor rehabilitators. And it has their phone numbers, their email addresses on there. So if anybody's interested in doing something like that, that would probably be the best route to go. You get in touch with one of those rehabbers and see if they do have the time to take somebody underneath their wing, so to speak.
And we'll get that link posted on the Facebook page in association with this recording. Thanks. So under normal circumstances, obviously not COVID, do you make school visits with your education birds?
We try to. A lot of my volunteers are college students, so their schedules vary. And so we try to work in school schedules as best we can. Of course, like I said, everybody's college students, or we all have full-time jobs. And I don't like to ask any of my volunteers to use their vacation time to do programs. So, but like I said, we do have a lot of college kids that a lot of times we can accommodate that, but not always.
Do you have any Mississippi kites or peregrine falcons at your facility? Someone's 7-year-old son is watching and would like to know. He plans on becoming a falconer when he gets old enough.
We do have a peregrine. Unfortunately, it's non-releasable. Is part of our education birds, and we do not have any kites right now. Kites, we're going to get swamped with kites probably in the next month. We've had 2 kites so far this year. The first one came to us just last week. Unusual story. First time this has happened to me in my rehab experience. It was actually found on the ground. It was egg bound. Couldn't lay its own eggs. So our veterinarian sedated it and squeezed the egg out. And we took it out the next day, took it back where it was found. There were other kites flying around. He got a drink of water and took right back to the sky again. But the kites, of course, a lot of people, I'm sure they know, the kites have just come back to the United States from South America. Unfortunately, we got a kite in a couple days after that one, had a broken right wrist, had to be euthanized. And of course, I don't like to euthanize any raptor, but kites, I have a fondness towards kites because they've made such a long journey to get here, only to end up in the predicaments that, sometimes do and have to be euthanized. So It's a sad situation. Along with the kites, we did have a kite that came to us extremely late last August as a fledgling. There's no way it was going to make the migration time. So we wintered it over, and about 3 weeks ago, we released it after the kites came back to our area. So it's out there. So it'll return back to South America like it should this year. And that's the second
Very
time we've
nice.
actually done that with kites.
Do you always return a rehabilitated animal to the location where you first collected it?
We try our best to, but it's not always possible at all because logistically and financially, it's just impossible. We do get birds from all over the state. Like I said, with working a full-time job, I do not have the time to drive, 6-hour round trip to take a barred owl back to where it came from. Also, right now we have 13 barred owls that we're getting ready to release. They came to us owlets this year. Somebody will give me a bird and they will say, well, can you bring it back? Well, when I put your owl in with that other owl, barred owl, they look just alike to me. So I can't tell which one's which. We don't band them. We don't mark them. I don't have a permit to do any kind of banding. Bald eagles, we do go above and beyond to try to return them back to where they were found. Any other birds, if we can do it and they're local, yes, we will take them back to where they're found as well. But the ones we have to travel a great distance for, it's just not logistically possible.
Well, bald eagles do have extra protection under the Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Protection Act.
Right. And a lot of times with the bald eagles, Arkansas Game Fish Commission, I loved Arkansas Game Fish Commission. Their field officers, their law enforcement officers, they're very, very good about bringing us birds of prey, especially bald eagles. So a lot of times the bald eagles, when they're ready to go back out to the wild, we actually will do a relay between, I'll hand it off to one officer, that officer in turn will hand it off to another officer, and they will take it back to, eventually back to where it was found and release it back into the wild again.
Do falconers ever accept one of your rehabilitated birds?
That is possible if we have a first year bird. I can't see. That's a state law that's just changed in the last few years. So I really probably better not speak to that. It'd probably be better off to find a falconer, excuse me, a falconer, and ask them question. Falconers' license and permits are handled by the state, Arkansas State Game and Fish Commission now. They used to be a federal, but now it's the state. And like I said, they just changed that law within the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm uneasy answering that question, with any authority there too.
And I know that falconers, of course, want to start with young birds because they want that bird to imprint on them. And that helps with the training and the bond between the bird and the person.
Right. And here in Arkansas, they can only have a red-tailed hawk and a kestrel. The apprentices can. And I'm told this, I can't verify either. It's just word of mouth. I'm told that great horned owl is possible for an apprentice to have now. It's possible. I don't know that for a fact. But primarily the red-tailed hawk and the kestrels are what an apprentice will start out with. And actually, falconers do a great service towards preservation or conservation towards raptors, because they're taking these raptors out as young birds. They're training them, honing their skills that they instinctively know already to hunt. They will keep them for several years, and then a lot of times will release them back into the wild. Matter of fact, the peregrine falcon almost became extinct back in 1967, 68, I believe it was, due in large part to falconers. It was the cause of the resurgence of their population.
Well, it helps to have experience in raising those birds in captivity, which had to be done to save the peregrine falcon as well as other rare falcons around the world.
Right.
So someone wants to know, if you do find an injured raptor, what's the best way to pick it up safely to get it to a rehabilitator?
Primarily, the biggest danger, biggest threat with any raptor are his feet and his talons. Okay, anything with a mouth will bite if it gets bad enough. Okay, but trust me, the feet and the talons, except when you get bit in the mouth by a bald eagle. The feet and the talons pose the biggest threat. So throw a coat over it, throw a jacket over it, or a towel over it, something of that nature, and put it in a cardboard box or a kennel. do not try to feed it. Do not try to give it water. A lot of people have that nurturing instinct. It's the first thing they want to do for some reason. They want to try to give it water, try to give it food. And unless you know what it eats, whether it's hungry or not, it's probably not going to eat. We've had people give them bacon, hot dogs, raw eggs, cooked eggs, things they shouldn't. People will try to give them water with eyedroppers or syringes, and they don't realize it, but they're probably squirting the water right down into their lungs because their trachea is located right at the bottom of their mouth. And so don't do that. But wrap it up in something, put it in a box, put it in a pet carrier, and contact a rehabilitator just as soon as you can.
And birds of prey can go some time without eating because
Oh, absolutely.
they're not successful in their hunt, so they do go some time without food.
Exactly, exactly.
Another question is, are you seeing an increase or a decrease in lead poisoning in birds of prey?
Definitely an increase in my experience. I call it the new DDT, just to give some a little bit of perspective to it. In the last 10 years, we've probably lost 8 bald eagles to lead poisoning. About 2 years ago, we had a black vulture taken to our clinic. Just as soon as it was x-rayed, it basically dropped dead. Anyway, they sent blood off to the state lab here in Little Rock, or there in Little Rock, and the lead levels were so high their equipment could not read how bad the lead toxicity was. From the x-rays, we could actually see a metal object in the abdomen area. And so I actually got to be a part of it. Unfortunately, the bird died, but I was actually fortunate to get to be part of the necropsy there at the clinic. And we actually dissected the bird, and it was a 22 caliber bullet slug. Probably what had happened was the vulture ate a squirrel or rabbit, something of that nature, that somebody had shot with a 22, and it ingested the lead. A lot of people don't understand that too. That's how they do get the lead poisoning. They have to ingest it. A lot of people think I'm anti-hunting. I'm not. I'm pro-hunter. I don't hunt anymore because I just don't like to hunt. A lot of times deer hunters, they don't always catch the deer that they've shot. Sometimes they escape. Also, will leave gut piles in the field with the lead in it. That's when your scavengers, your vultures, your coyotes, your bald eagles will actually eat that gut pile and have that lead fragments in it. And when they've ingested it, that's when the lead poisoning starts. And usually by the time we get a lead poisoned bird at our facility, it's too late to do anything because the bird has been out in the wild so long and the toxic level has increased the longer it's been out there unfound. In one situation, have we brought a bird back from lead poisoning? Treat them with calcium EDTA, which is the same treatment that people are given for lead poisoning. The calcium EDTA is actually injected into their body. The lead is attracted to that chemical, and then they'll pass it through their mutes.
So lead shot is the most common way that raptors ingest lead, get exposed to lead.
Slugs, lead shot. Also, our waterfowl will ingest lead sinkers, lead split shot that we've lost in the bottom of ponds. They're bottom feeders. So they'll ingest it that way as well.
And then the birds of prey will eat the waterfowl, and then that lead bioaccumulates up the food chain.
Exactly. It's entirely possible.
Higher, sure. Yeah, higher levels of the food chain.
We had a 27-pound trumpeter swan several years ago. Died of lead poisoning, got the piece of lead out of its stomach. It was about the size of a BB. That's all it took to kill a 27-pound trumpeter swan.
Oh. And my understanding is that lead poisoning is not a good way to go.
It's very difficult to watch. It's extremely difficult to watch. We've actually euthanized one bald eagle because it was past the point of return. So we euthanized it just out of mercy, put it out of its misery, because it totally destroys their nervous system. It's agonizing to watch, even when you try to bring them back and you're doing everything you can, but up front it's kind of a hopeless cause, but you still got to give it a try.
Yep. Are there any raptors on the endangered species list?
Not here in Arkansas. I don't know the status of the spotted owl up in the Pacific Northwest. I haven't heard anything about that in years. But as far as Arkansas, there's nothing on the endangered species list. at this point.
Yeah, because bald eagles and peregrine falcons but they've been delisted. They are good conservation success stories.
Right.
Because of the banning of DDT, but that doesn't mean that they don't still face threats, because clearly they do. Otherwise, your services wouldn't be needed.
Right. And back to the lead poisoning, we don't test every bird that comes through here for lead poisoning. We primarily do that for the bald eagles alone, especially if they don't have any obvious injuries, nothing broken, anything like that. It's like, what's wrong? Because we don't have the money to pay to test every bird for everything. So it's financially, expensive to do that too.
I do have a message from a falconer who says that yes, great horned owls are permissible, but not recommended.
I agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, if barred owls are docile birds, I think great horned owls would be the exact opposite of them in the owl world.
We actually transferred a great horned owl to a falconer up in Idaho several years ago. It was an imprint, and it was legal to do it there in Idaho. So we transferred it to him. Never heard anything back from him. The downside, I think, probably this falconer may chime back in. I don't know. Probably the downside with using a great horned owl, owls don't have a crop. So as soon as they capture their prey, if you don't get to them, get that prey, and they eat it, it's going straight to their stomach, and they're probably finished hunting for the day. So I think that's at least one of the reasons.
I see, because food is the motivator to keep them going.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Any other questions for Rodney? Remember, you can put them in the chat box or in the comment box. I'd like to know, how long is a bird normally in your care before it gets released?
That varies, just like the Mississippi kite I spoke of that was egg-bound this last week. We only had it 3 days. So that was a short term, which that's what we love. That's what we really like. We actually have a great horned owl at our facility right now. We've had for a year and a half. It was hit by a vehicle by a doctor going on his way to work one morning in Jacksonville, Arkansas, stuck in the grill of his truck. And he had to go through a complete and total molt. The feathers, there's nothing broken on it. I mean, it's a miracle the bird even survived. Nothing was broken. Severe feather damage. So he had to go through a full molt. So you're talking 3 days all the way up to this example here, a year and a half. But normally, for an average bird with a broken wing, for example, probably 8 weeks. We're looking at 8 weeks at least, because they have to get over the injury, and then we have to get them back out into a flight cage to make sure they get their muscle strength back up and they can be successfully released back in the wild. So 8 weeks is average for a typical bird.
Under normal circumstances, do you host visitors at your facility?
No, we do not, because that is not allowed by our permit, because we are a rehab facility. Even though we have our education birds on site, our rehabilitation birds are totally off limits. I have signs posted around our facility on all the rehab cages to remind my volunteers, do not talk to the rehab birds, do not interact with them, because we do not want them socialized. Because our goal is return them back out in the wild with as little human impression as possible. And so that's why we can't allow visitors.
But if a raptor is kept long enough, will it bond with a human?
I do see that with the owlets in particular, because yes, they do get used to seeing us as the food source. Bonding, no, not really. Our rehab birds, it's not like we walk out, not like we're setting a bowl of food down for our cat or our dog. We'll basically open the door, just throw it in the door, and that's it. We, like I said, very, very little human interaction with them whatsoever.
Well, any other questions for Rodney? I'd like to end with a very important question. That is, what is your favorite bird?
Vultures.
Ah! Black vulture versus turkey vulture, or just the vultures in general?
Probably the black vulture, because I just think they're more attractive, physically attractive. But if you think about it, vultures eat nothing but dead stuff, so they don't have to work for their food. It's already there. All the other birds of prey, they have to go out, they have to hunt. The vultures are extraordinary birds overall anyway. But I really, I have a really, attraction to vultures. If I were to come back in another life, it would be a vulture.
There you have it, folks. An inordinate fondness for vultures.
You just walk up your food and it's already ready.
Excellent point. Well, thank you, Rodney, for taking the time to answer all of our questions tonight. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, we do have more of these coming up. We have Ask a Hummingbird Bander, Tana Beasley, coming up. So get your hummingbird questions ready, and more Better Know a Birder interviews too. And those can all be found at our Facebook page and Audubon Arkansas's website. So have a good evening.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions. I really do appreciate it. And fact check me, Google, find out do your own research. I do occasionally get things wrong. So anyway, thanks a lot. I sure appreciate it, Dan.
Yeah, me too. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.